that professes to be a so-called Christian, you should have been recused from the jury because it would be improper because you're prejudiced. And it would just simply not be in accordance with jurisprudence by common law for you to even be here in the jury box. But rather than get wrapped up in some technicalities, we want to move forward because the prosecution believes we have more than enough evidence to convince you that Jesus Christ is not King of Kings, He's not Lord of Lords, based upon what you heard this week. There's a few things that we'd like to talk to you about as far as what your duty is. And oftentimes the judge will instruct the jury on what their duties are, but in this case, let me just simply remind you that there's some simple but important instructions that you should know what your legal obligations are as jurors, as you're fulfilling your civic duty. As a juror in a courtroom, you're expected to keep an open mind until you hear and see all the facts that are presented to you, and only upon conclusion of the facts and the terms are you then to make a consensus and try to reach a unanimous verdict. That's the way the courtroom, that's the way our judicial system works. In the absence of a unanimous verdict, in this case, the defense loses and the prosecution prevails. In this case, as is the practice in our modern judicial system, this is the way we seek justice and this is the way that we seek truth. Now there's some fundamental instructions that I'd like to go over with you. If you in fact believe the book, as defense counsel Miller referred to as his solid evidence that Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, then you cannot reject the commandment that in the book of Hebrews there is some instruction. And it goes along the lines that you are to obey the laws of the land and to obey those who rule over you. Well, we ask the question, who sets forth the laws of the land in our country? We have several branches of government that does that. One of them is the judicial branch, and all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. We have people who enforce the laws of the land. That's our law enforcement and military. And another branch of the government that we rely upon, we always have to recognize we have to answer to someone. Now, defense counsel Miller would have you believe that we have to answer to this King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That he wants you to believe really continues to exist. Now, there's some heavy burden of proof on the defense. I'm not sure that he realizes this, but you have to, as jurors, operate within the confines of the law. And so you must understand that the burden of proof on the defense here is heavier than what it normally would be, simply because this is not a simple case in regards to what the defense claim is. I mean, the defense is claiming that this character by the name of Jesus is someone who is able to walk on water. He's able to make the blind see, able to make the lame walk. He's able to raise people from the dead. He's able to raise himself from the dead. In fact, one of the things that struck the Pharisees the most was that he was in fact able to forgive sin and to save people from a place he called hell. That is some kind of man. And so there are two different degrees of proof in the court system. One is simply that you acknowledge that it's proof beyond the preponderance of evidence. That's where it calls for compelling, convincing facts and evidence that get entered in to the trial process. The other one is simply that we would look for what we would call beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, this case has to go beyond what we would call reasonable doubt. It has to meet the standard under jurisprudence of beyond the preponderance of evidence. And so I hope that you understand the difference and why that you need to understand that There's some things here that we want to examine. I mean, when he talks about all the things that this man Jesus did, he should be able to back that up with something more than what he's brought before you today. We would call this Defense Exhibit 1, the book, the Bible. I don't think anybody would disagree. This Bible was written by men. This is a man-written book. There's been millions, maybe billions of man-written books throughout the ages. Why would we believe this book any more than we would any other book that we read? So, it's more than just believing as he tugged at your heartstrings about his experiences and what he's gone through. You have to know what the facts are, and you have to make a determination whether or not Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So, obviously, otherwise, you're just going to drink the Kool-Aid that he's poured for you. And so you have to make, as he said, you have to make up your own mind. In a court of law, your heart doesn't come into play here, unfortunately. You have to make up your mind based upon the facts. Now, the prosecution must claim from the onset in its closing argument that, in my opinion, the defense has just simply failed to present what we would call a prima facie case. In other words, we think that he's failed miserably at being able to establish that Jesus even exists. I mean, if you look over at the defense table, you don't even see a defendant sitting there. In a courtroom setting, you would see a defendant. He's not there. Where is he? If he lives, where's he at? Well, he's not here in the courtroom today to defend himself. He's got defense counsel Miller here to do it for him. And he wants you and me and the judge and the people in the gallery to believe what he tells you happened to him when he's never seen Jesus, he's never talked to Jesus, he's never spoken to him face to face, he's never had a discussion with him over the telephone. He can't even describe what Jesus' features are. But we're simply to take Counsel Miller's words for it and just be able to believe it. Well, he may have done a great job tugging at your heartstrings about some of the things that he's gone through and some of the things that you've gone through. But unfortunately, the prosecution doesn't have the advantage of being able to cross-examine this Jesus to ask him questions about why he did certain things and why he didn't do certain things. And so I think it's amazing to this prosecutor, and hopefully it's as equally amazing to this jury, who is an educated group of people, and certainly to the judge, who is a well-educated man. He wouldn't be in the position he is if he wasn't. That this defense attorney believes he can come into a court of law and simply lay out the facts as he did, with the only evidence that he's got is the book. I mean, that's unbelievable. But yet, in this instant case that's before you, he still wants to make the claim that Jesus is the Almighty King of Kings and Lord of Lords that came into the world. But at the same time, he says Jesus was just a man like you and I. He was in the flesh like you and I. Well, we think that the defense counsel has gone to great lengths to play on your emotions by telling you story after story about this individual called Jesus. But in reality, he's offered no substantive proof that he ever really existed, let alone if he did exist, that somehow after his death he arose from the dead and now he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Let's consider, if you would, some facts that are not in dispute. There is no dispute in what we would call Exhibit Number 1 that this is a man-written book. And it's someone else's account of what took place. It's not Defense Counsel Miller's account. Jesus didn't write this book. He focused all week long, as he put his case on 4 writers: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the writers. These were men like you and I. These were men who were employed, like many of us in this room, up until the day Jesus came along and said, You're unemployed, you're unemployed, you're unemployed, come with me, follow me. And all of a sudden we had 4 guys, then 12 guys then who became unemployed. Now this is the kind of Jesus that he's talked about, who